Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. This is Josh. I'm joined as always by Sam. We have a full breakdown for you guys of Talladega. A lot to take away from that race. First, though, Sam, how are you doing? I want to say happy birthday as well. How did you enjoy the races, and how did you enjoy your birthday weekend?
I'm doing great. I appreciate it. I had a great time watching Talladega this weekend, as always. Looking forward to talking about it, and we got a lot to preview for next week, too, so can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, let's get right into it with Talladega, where Austin Cindric wins for the first time in 2025. Definitely a deserved win for Cindric, in my opinion. He's probably, been the best or one of the best guys on these super speedways the past couple years, and just didn't really have the results to show for it. Just involved in a lot of crashes and whatnot. That's just super speedway racing, but I thought it was a great drive from Cindric and probably one of the more deserved victories we've seen in quite some time for a NASCAR guy.
Yeah, I mean, this was much deserved. Penske, as always, bringing their best to the super speedways, just like we saw in Daytona, like we've seen in Atlanta. I know that, unfortunately, for Logano and Blaney, both their days ended early, but we end up with Austin Cindric here in the winner's circle, and very deservingly so. Like you said, just a great history. Ran so well at Daytona this year, and was really unfortunate not to win there. And just one of the best super speedway racers, I think, certainly at this point in
Yeah,
the
like you
series.
mentioned, he won, or he had a great showing at Daytona. He had a great showing at Atlanta as well. Kind of came up empty-handed for both of those. But if you look back at his results the last 3 years, I mean, he's a guy. He has an average finish of 16.3 on super speedways, and an average starting position of 10.9. You can get involved in so many accidents here and have such good days that I feel like an average finishing position of 16.3 is actually pretty good for super speedways, all things considered. And then he has 2 wins in that time period as well, 4 top 5s, 6 top 10s. Just a guy who's kind of always up there, always sniffing around for wins at super speedways. And having issues at Daytona, having issues at Talladega. It wasn't his best race overall today. He wasn't a guy that I was looking at the whole race as a guy, up there fighting in contention the whole time. But just for an overall body of work on a certain type of track over the last few years, I think Cindric deserves it, more than probably anybody else at this point.
Yeah, honestly, for a lot of the day, this looked like a day where the Toyotas would dominate. We saw a lot from JGR in 2311, and all the Toyota teams up there looked so good for a while, but just due to some strategy calls at the end there, and I mean, a little bit of right place, right time. But Cindric is so skilled at these kinds of tracks, and so are all the Hendrick guys. We end up with 4 Hendrick guys here in the top 7 or 8 as well, all 4 of them. So yeah, just a little bit of right place, right time, but this is certainly still deserved from Austin Cindric. Like we said, has done everything you can pretty much to win a super speedway race. I know that he has won before at super speedways, of course, but it had been a little while, and was a guy that deserved
Yeah,
another
it's
one.
kind of weird, you bringing up the Toyotas. I feel like they're a team, they're a manufacturer they're kind of always there for a good majority of the race, and then I feel like, especially at Talladega, we've seen, time and time again, they kind of just somehow take themselves out near the end, or aren't there when they should have been, and they have been all day at the end. Not many of them were around to be near the front at this one. They kind of got checked up when Ross went up high and kind of blocked their run coming out of that last pit cycle there. So I remember a couple years back they were on what seemed to be the winning strategy and crashed themselves out when they were single file at Talladega as well. So it just feels like the Toyotas, for some reason, are they run well throughout the majority of these super speedway races, but then when it gets down to the end, they're just kind of nowhere to be found, whether it's through the fault of their own or for other circumstances. They just don't happen to be there.
Yeah, it's funny. Ross Chastain in 20th, making maybe the race-saving move
Yeah.
for a lot of these guys up front, but that's just the way Talladega is, and it's just a little bit unlucky on their end because, like I said, the Toyotas were fast for a lot of the day, and I really thought that they would be the ones at the end. I thought maybe we'd be talking about a first win of the year for someone like Ty
Mhm.
Gibbs, or one of those other guys up that had been riding up front all day, and it doesn't make the Cindric win any less deserving because he was fantastic as well. And what really matters at these super speedways is keeping your car clean and being in the right spot at the end. And he executed to a T as he has so many times before at these tracks. And yeah, that was the difference at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
moving to the guy who crossed the finish line second and the guy who crossed the finish line fifth, Ryan Preece and Joey Logano both DQ'd after the race for spoiler violations, but both separate, separate violations of their own. Preece for unapproved shims in the rear spoiler area, and then Logano for some unsecured braces in the spoiler area as well. I would say it sucks for both of those guys. Priest, the closest he's come to winning a race for a long time up there. And if not, he was just going to come away with a good finish. And then for Logano, his first top five of the season as well gone now due to this disqualification. I don't see anything so far that either of these teams are planning on appealing, these rulings. So it seems to be the right call, I guess, from NASCAR. But it just sucks that it sucks for both of those guys because they ran pretty well all day.
Yeah, I think I might have misspoke earlier about Logano, but yeah, I mean it's unfortunate for him certainly, but at the end of the day, that team will be back again, and we'll have plenty of chances to win races and have these high finishes. It's definitely more of a bummer for Ryan Preece. It would have been even more of a bummer if he ended up winning this race, but of course, still second place is a great result for him, and yeah, to get the DQ is just a real, it's kind of a double kick in the teeth there from just losing out on winning this race, and it really would have been a milestone win for him, and then coming out and you don't even get second place, you're back to the back of the pack, and yeah, that's just a brutal weekend for him. Logano, I think it'll be a little bit easier to rebound, but Priest is just, it's really, really tough
Yeah,
for
a
him.
tough end for Priest and for really all of the RFK cars as well, but we'll get to them a little bit later. One of the big takeaways from this race, I think, was just the super speedway racing in general, and NASCAR has kind of been not up to kind of the standards that we'd like to see, really, other than Atlanta. I think Daytona and Talladega have struggled the past couple of years in this next gen car. Just it's hard to make a run, to get a run. But I think one of the things that I've noticed, and probably one of the things that's easier to fix than the car itself, and I think would make the racing better, is fixing the fuel saving problem that we have at super speedways right now. I don't know if that's getting rid of stages, if that's changing the stage lengths. To me, I think the stages have a big part to do with why they fuel save the way that they do right now. Like I said, yeah, the car has its issues, but I think the quickest way to make the racing better is to get rid of the fuel saving as quick as we can, and I think that starts with the stages because, say you make stage 1 40 laps instead of 60, those guys are going to be able to run flat out the whole time. Green flag drop to green checkered there. Stage break caution. I don't know if that's something that you could take away as well, as keep the stages, but just get rid of the stage break cautions. That's something that I've called for really on all configurations of NASCAR tracks for a while now. But I think that if you change the stage lengths, like I said, maybe 40 laps in the first. You maybe keep the second one 60 or whatever, and there might be some fuel saving in there, but that's all you can. You can only do so much, and then make that last one. It'd be 80 something laps there to the finish. I think that would break it up better because I think that you'd have guys just kind of run flat out 40 and 40 there to the finish. And instead of trying to do some other, crazy fuel saving thing that just makes the whole pack slow down, makes the passing less frequent, and kind of just takes away a lot from the race. So I think that would be a quick fix that NASCAR could do that would maybe help some of these super speedway issues that we've seen mostly at Talladega and Daytona. Keep Atlanta the way it is. Atlanta's been great right now.
Yeah, no, definitely don't change anything in Atlanta. I think that at the end of the day, we're still getting exciting finishes at these tracks. Obviously, sometimes we end up with the overtime issues and whatnot that are kind of tough to fix. Everybody going, all out there at the end and throwing caution to the wind. But I think at the end of the day, yeah, it would be nice to have a better racing throughout the race instead of just kind of jamming it all at the end of there. I like what you're saying about fuel saving, trying to get rid of that as much as possible and seeing these guys go all out, because at the end of the day, that's really what the fans come to see, especially on a track like Talladega where, everybody wants to see them throw caution to the wind and just kind of go crazy for 188 laps. I think that would be certainly a way to keep fans more engaged throughout the race. And these NASCAR races can get pretty long. They're twice as long as most of the other series we cover. So, if we're going to have stages, I wouldn't mind playing with the lengths a little bit there, and then maybe we can get some more entertaining racing throughout. Maybe you guys get more, we get more 2, 3, even 4 wide. I think we saw a little bit, instead of everybody getting single file and playing it safe there for a while.
Yeah, I think it would just be, it's weird because we see on these other configurations that NASCAR goes to, the stage lengths usually start shorter and then get a little bit longer, and then stage 3 is really the longest there. And this one felt pretty evenly split. It was 60, 60, 68, and that's just because it's 188 laps. So you can really, you can only kind of do that in so many ways there at the end. So, yeah, I'd like to see maybe 40, 60, 80 or something, and let these guys play with it a little bit. And then also each stage is different as well. You have one fully flat-out stage, one where you might have to fuel save a little bit, and then the last one where you could kind of, you have the option to do both. I think that's a great option. It would really add a little bit more intrigue quicker into this than, overhauling the whole car, which is going to be, a pretty lengthy process and not one that I think NASCAR is eager to jump at pretty quickly.
Yeah, or maybe 2 shorter stages at the start of the race, 45 and 45, and then go 90 laps to the end. And that would feel more like kind of a race you have in the old days where there were no stages, and it's more natural racing maybe in the second half of the race, and then in the first half you can have almost like duels or something like we get, kind of these guys going all out, especially at the end there to get some stage points. So I'd probably leave it to the experts to determine exactly how to play with the fuel windows and get the exact mileage right and number of laps right. But I think that's certainly a great idea.
I think it's just the the easiest, quickest fix. It's not it's kind of just putting a Band-Aid on it, but in terms of getting the racing better, quicker, I think that's probably the best option that we have right now for these super speedways. Moving on to back to Joey Logano. I guess we already touched on him a little bit for the DQ, but he kind of went off on the radio at the end of stage 2 actually about his teammate Cindric, saying that he kind of just allowed the Toyota of Bubba Wallace there to win the stage because he just got out of line and kind of left Logano out to dry in a way. But if Cindric keeps going there, he runs hard into the back of Logano, and that probably causes an accident. So I think, all things considered, those comments probably weren't necessary, given the fact that I think Cindric actually helped his teammate out in the long term by keeping him in the race. It might have hurt him in that stage, but it's better to be alive and keep running than it is to be out of the race at the end of stage 2 and not get any stage points there either. So I think looking back at it, Logano will probably realize that, and hopefully, I'm not sure. I haven't seen him, make any amendments to that statement as of yet. But I think he'll look back on it and realize that Cindric was probably just doing the right thing there.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, these guys say a lot in the heat of the moment. In any of these series that we cover, they'll get on the radio and kind of say what's ever on their mind, whether it's prudent or not. I think at the end of the day, I would agree with you here. It's much more important to stay in the race and go for a win. I mean, both these guys, obviously, Cindric ended up winning the race, and Logano wasn't that far behind before the DQ. So I think, looking back on it, they both agree it's much better to be in the race there than instead of worrying about stage points. Especially, I know that Bubba's had a nice season and could be in the playoffs this year, but I just don't think it's not like you're in a championship battle here. At the end of the season, and every point, might come down to the last point or something. I don't think there's enough there to warrant Joey's reaction, and it's just much better to just play it safe there and not risk causing an accident with your teammate. We already saw these guys involved in an accident at Daytona. Saw a big Penske accident there, multiple car pileup, and certainly wanted to learn their lesson from that, I'm sure.
Yeah, the thing that surprises me the most, I think, is just the fact that he just openly said that on the radio about his teammate. You don't see guys usually talk like that and kind of, cuss their teammate out just blatantly over the radio like that. To me, I was a little surprised to see that. I know guys say stuff a lot in the heat of the moment out there, but you usually see at least some restraint when it comes to your teammates. I know it's been a frustrating season so far for Joey, no top five still, but you got to show a little bit of restraint there, especially on a track, and where you really need your teammates' help probably the most of anywhere else. If Cindric hears about that, he's probably more liable to leave Logano out to dry again later on, in a situation where he might have the opportunity to stay behind him and not wreck him in a different situation. Probably not the smartest thing that Joey's ever done over the radio, but it's heat of the moment, and from his angle, he probably didn't know that he was going to stack him up behind and cause a wreck and maybe be involved in it as well. So I think he'll probably regret saying that, but also you never know with Joey as well. So.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is just these guys can only see so much when they're in the car in the heat of the moment, and they're not always aware of everything around them. So I agree with you. At the end of the day, he's probably gonna regret this one, if only just because it was about a teammate, and you never want to mess with the team harmony like that, especially this early in the season when there's not really a title at stake or anything.
Yeah, I'm there with you. Let's get to, I think, the biggest thing from the race, the thing that kind of bugged the most fans out, other than maybe the actual racing itself not being as exciting as we'd like to see all the time. But the fact, I feel like Fox was actually doing a decent job most of the day. I wouldn't say it was, a fantastic job, but it wasn't anything that stuck out bad to me. Like I was going to complain about the broadcast after the race. And then we get to the last 20 laps, and they decide to go to multiple long commercial breaks during that time period. One inside 20 to go, and then they go to commercial break with 9 to go. They don't come back until there's 5 laps left in the race. At super speedways, everything's been building up to this moment at the end. It's the most, it's the part that you are the most interested in at the end, is these last 20 laps of a super speedway race. And that's the time that they decide to go to back-to-back commercials there at the end. It kind of felt insulting to the fans to do that right at the end there. It didn't really allow them to set anything up for the end of the race either, to lay out the guys who were battling for the win and what it would mean and all that. It felt like they kind of just rushed towards the end there because they came back from commercial with 5 laps left, and they're still trying to bring a little bit of an update from Byron's team with 3 to go, and then they're throwing in, like, at the end. It just felt like if you were listening to just the announcers, you wouldn't really know that they were even coming to the line to finish the race. So it just didn't. It felt like it was a big missed opportunity from Fox to have, the biggest part of the race just be tarnished like that by the 2 commercial breaks. It's just painful to watch, and it continues to remind me that Fox, they have a lot of work to do to catch up to what we would hope the standard would be for a televised, nationally televised broadcast of the biggest racing series in America.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, that we have to keep having these conversations. I actually, I didn't think it was an amazing broadcast, but I didn't think it was the worst they'd ever done. I think there was some a nice insight, and Larry Mack's trends and everything were good as always, and there were some positives in there, but the commercials, I agree with you, were just really kind of over the top this week. The one with under 20 to go, I was already a little weary, a little tired of them, and then like you mentioned, under 10 to go at Talladega for a commercial is just ridiculous. I mean, that's some of the most exciting racing you're going to get all year, and it's they do the side by side, and where you don't even have the sound on the race, and it's really disappointing. I think mentally they're probably prepping for overtime, so they're throwing a commercial there a little bit earlier on. But if there's overtime, I'd rather have like a even if you have to do like a minute long commercial while they're under caution or something for overtime, I'd rather have that than when you're 10 to go and you have to do this side by side thing. It's just, I guess it's better than totally cutting away, but it's still nothing close to what the fans want.
Yeah, it's just it just feels disrespectful in a way to the fans, and I like, when I was watching it, I kind of like audibly gasped when I saw that they were going back to commercial break with 10 laps to go in the race, and then every commercial that played during that commercial break, I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, they're still going, like, when is this thing gonna end? And it took 4 full laps. It was a full it wasn't like a 1 minute commercial break. It was a full length commercial break that they threw in with under 10 laps to go. I know it's a 40-50 second lap, but still, I mean, that's just, you can't do that. That's that's just kind of, I feel like that's an obvious thing to notice as a broadcast team and crew, is to not go to commercial at the end of a race when you've been building all day to this. Like I said, on super speedways, it really comes down to those last 20 laps when guys just let it go and are making big moves and doing crazy things in the race, and we don't even know how Ryan Preece really gets to the front. We don't have any context for that because he just kind of shows up there again after we cut out from commercial. I know it was side by side, so you could still see what was happening with the race, but I mean, I'd rather have side by side than not, like you said, but when there's under 10 to go, I'd just prefer there to be no commercial breaks at all, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think I did a full audible gasp, but I was shell-shocked, to say the least. Going to commercial with less than 10 to go at Talladega is just outrageous. So hopefully when we get to the later part of the year, hopefully with, say what you will about Amazon and Amazon Prime, that whole deal, but hopefully they can learn some lessons from this starting this year and, maybe figure it out for the races that they have, and then obviously as we get later in the calendar, get away from Fox, just it'll be nice to have that switch up this year.
TNT as well, maybe they learn from some of these things and can, for their few races, can maybe do a little bit as well. I feel like at a certain point one of these races is going to end under side by side. I'm just waiting for them to just not realize it and put a commercial break, right at the end, and we have, maybe with 1 lap left, they come out of their side-by-side commercial and say, here's the end of the race. It's getting to a point where it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, or they'll do it was it the Xfinity or ARCA race where they just like cut to the local news or something on the last lap and they're cut to commercial. They didn't even see the end of the race. Like, we're gonna get something like that soon.
It's getting to that point, and I really didn't think we'd get that far gone, but this was a wake up call for sure. I think from Fox, and hopefully they learn from it at least a little bit. Getting to some of the crashes from the day, we didn't really have the Talladega big one. It felt like a pretty clean race. We had the one between Busch, Keselowski, and Blaney. Blaney still can't catch a break, man. He's just, you feel bad for him. Wasn't even really involved in that accident. Just got clipped at the very, very end. Almost missed it. And then he's out of the race as well. Keselowski, feel bad for him as well. He was having a pretty solid day up there before that. Seemed like Busch just didn't know that the Fords were pitting in front of him and got into the back of Keselowski as a result. That's kind of the risk you take when you're coming off these, going 180, 190 down to 55 at these super speedways, and everyone's trying to do it at the last possible second. That just happens sometimes, and, it was a tough break for those guys. Busch was having a solid day as well, so just a tough break for all three of those guys, really, to get caught up in that one.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, I have to debate whether I keep on picking Blaney here in our pre-race predictions because I keep on doing it, and then something new happens every week. It just, I don't even know what to say anymore. It's just an accident or this or that, and strategy. It's just every week it's something new, and it's unfortunate because he has driven the car well. It's not been a year where he's lost the car or anything. He just kind of can't catch a break, and you could say the same until this race. There was a few times Cindric was in the same boat. It's just been a little bit of kind of an unlucky year for a lot of those guys over Penske. But Kyle Busch as well. He qualifies on the front row for this race, and another guy who can't catch a break ends up a little bit further back in the pack and ends up in this incident. So really all three guys here, but Keselowski, you could argue is underperformance. I guess you could say the same about Kyle Busch as well, but all three of these guys really just kind of struggling to different levels, but none of them are having really fully the season that they wanted to have.
Yeah, I think the big positive, at least for Blaney, is he's still 8th in points, was 6th heading into this week, and he has 4 DNFs so far this year, the most of any driver out there, and he's still top 10 in points. I think that's something that you have to take away as a positive, I guess. I was really hoping that this week off for them would turn it around. Like we said in the pre-race last week, we thought we both thought that Blaney was going to win. That didn't end up being the case, obviously. I was hoping that week off would turn it around. It did not. It's tough at a super speedway. Obviously, there's so much luck involved there in getting lucky, and still not getting lucky for Blaney. So hopefully that turns around soon. But like I said, still 8th in points. A lot of positives so far this year, just based on pure pace. I feel like he's been just as good as anyone. So eventually these things will turn around, and he'll shoot back up the standings and back into the top 5 pretty quickly here, I think.
Yeah, he will. Like you mentioned, that's kind of the bright side of all this. Is he's certainly not far off. He's doing very well in the points for being probably the unluckiest guy in the series this year. So to come back out of this and still be in the top 10 with plenty of races left to go, he'll be fine. He'll eventually get one of these and make his way into the playoffs. I just don't really know when that time's going to come.
Yeah. To the other crash, Bell, Buescher, and Hamlin involved in that one. Just kind of Bell got a little bit loose off the front bumper of Hamlin coming out of turn 2, and just really glad Bell's okay with this one. That was a hard hit into that inside barrier on the back stretch there. yeah, glad to see that he was okay, and the safer barrier and the next gen car combined, I think, did a lot to help keep him safe there. So really glad to see he was okay. It was very similar to the Zilich hit at the end of the Xfinity race. If you were able to catch that, it was a very similar hit for both of those guys. Safer barrier keeping both of them safe there. So just really only thing from that one is just to shout out that Bell's okay, and even not too long ago that hit could have been much worse. So
Yeah, I'm glad he's okay. I mean, that was a pretty awful crash, and on top of obviously most important that he's okay, like you mentioned, but another guy in a Toyota that I thought was primed for a really good day was running up front for a lot of this race. So, it could have added another win potentially to his tally, but then again, maybe not given what we saw out of the Toyota strategy and everything. So, regardless, I'm glad he's okay, and yeah, that was one of the harder hits I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, back-to-back days too. Like I said, for Zilich and then Bell, and both those guys walking away okay. That was very good to see. My personal top 3 for Talladega, I had Austin Cindric number 1, getting that first win of 2025. And I feel like he's been really good as well this year. Just all around, I think he's improved a lot from where he's been the last couple years. Not just on super speedways, but everywhere. So it was a good win for him and well-deserved. In second, I had Kyle Larson, a better finish than usual for him on super speedways. Picked up a stage win there in stage 1 as well. I thought it was a solid race for him, and gets promoted to a nice second-place finish there, I believe, after the DQ for Ryan Preece. So it was a good result there for the Hendrick car. And then lastly, I had Noah Gragson to fill out my top 3. Finished 4th. It was his best finish of the season. His only top 10 other than this one came with a P8 at Coda. So, it's been a little bit since he cracked the top 10. I feel like he's actually drove fairly well this year, despite, being very far down in the standings and only having 2 top 10s. I feel like there's been some good moments from him. So, hopefully this is a sign of more to come, but super speedways, I mean, it's kind of just a crapshoot to an extent. Doesn't really tell you too much about someone's form, I guess, through a whole season. But I think this is a good finish for Gragson. Hopefully gets them in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. I've gone pretty similar with a little difference here. My first is Austin Cindric as well. Only led 7 laps, but nobody really led a dominant amount of laps in this race. And Cindric ends up right place, right time. But again, he played his cards the right way. And nailed the strategy. It's been fantastic as always on super speedways. So got to give him his flowers and put him in first there. I'm going to go with Gragson in second as well, just for a phenomenal day for him. And, this probably would have gone to Preece, obviously, before his DQ. But, given the DQ, I got to go with somebody different and pick up Gragson here in second. And then give a little shout-out to Carson Hocevar as well here in third. Comes in 6th in the race, 3rd on my personal podium, but it started all the way back in 28th and really played his cards right. Was the first car out of his group on that strategy, and so shout out to the pit crew as well and the strategy team for playing that right, and getting that car to the finish, and it's really solid top 10 finish for that team. So yeah, that's my personal podium is Cindric, Gragson, and Hocevar.
Yeah, good day for Hocevar, I think, especially considering the last super speedway we went to, he kind of caused a little bit of an uproar. He had some tense moments there, just, in the high speeds around Atlanta. But here he just kind of played it really quiet and finished with a nice P6 finish. Kept it quiet and clean. So, yeah, I thought it was a great drive from him as well. My stinker of the week is just the RFK cars, that whole crew. Busher P34 involved in an accident, Kozlowski P36 involved in an accident. Neither of those were really their doing. Just does suck to be caught up in it, though, when the Fords are, one of the better cars at the super speedways. and then Priest, the P38 DQ finish. It could have been kind of their saving grace there at the end with a second place, but then no, DQ turns into a P38. So tough for the top finisher for RFK to come in 34th when they're all Fords, and Fords kind of have a pretty good advantage on these super speedways.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest. I've tried to find somebody else, a driver or team, and it's a little bit tough at these super speedways because so many of these guys finish low, end up kind of in accidents that aren't their own doing. And RFK had some of that as well, but I'm gonna go with them as well. Just mostly with this Priest thing, obviously would have been a big deal for them coming in second, and they end up failing inspection there and getting DQ'd, and then like you mentioned, the two wrecks, even if they weren't really their fault, just really icing on the cake, and kind of just been such a disappointing season all around for RFK that it's not really just a race award. It's just another disappointment for them, and hopefully they can get it back on track soon. But yeah, they're a stinker of the week for me as
it was
well.
between them or Fox for me, so I ended up going with RFK though. Quick.
Yeah, that actually would have been a good one to switch it up.
That's all right. I think we touched on Fox enough already. So NASCAR fantasy update real quick here. Haven't updated in a few weeks, but Sam now takes the lead 240 to 230. Big weekend for you at Talladega, 32 points, most of anyone for a single race this season. So yeah, big weekend for your squad to take the lead. I've kind of just held a slight lead all season, but that big week for you guys at Talladega puts you up front.
Yeah, I think if anything, this just kind of shows how well we drafted. I mean, we're right next to each other still this deep into the season, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out. I think it's going to go down to the wire.
Yeah, I think it will too, and it's really going to rack up at the end when you get to the bonus points for making it to different rounds of the playoffs. That'll be really the deciding factor, I think. Let's go
absolutely.
to the some of the other big news from the week. The NASCAR Championship race heading back to Homestead in 2026. I think this is really great news. Phoenix has kind of run its course, I think, for the championship race. Homestead, I think, also opens it up to a lot more drivers that might have a chance to win a mile-and-a-half track, and one that I think is going to be a lot more exciting with just the current next-gen car being better on the mile-and-a-halfs or intermediate-style tracks than it is on the short tracks like Phoenix is. So I think it'll be a very positive change, one that I'm really excited for, and kind of a example of NASCAR, I think, listening to their fans and making the right changes and doing the right things. We've seen that a couple times with a few of the rule changes this past off season, and now this. I think really the only thing that we as fans for NASCAR really complain about now, I guess, that this has moved the championship race is the short track cars, still having its problems. And then, I think Fox as well, but that's not really on NASCAR to run that broadcast. So I think, that they're really listening to their fans with this one, I think, and that's a great step in the right direction for NASCAR at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something that we've talked about before, that Phoenix really is not the ideal track for a championship race. It's just so unique, seeing drivers kind of all over the track, and, a uniquely shaped track, and just it's not that it's not a good track. It deserves a spot on the calendar, but Homestead is a much more, a typical NASCAR track, and I think that it just makes sense. Obviously, we're biased because we're both from Florida, but starting the season in Florida and ending the season there is just a nice bookend, and it's maybe a little bit nostalgic too, because that's what we grew up with, a championship race in Homestead. But I'm certainly glad it's back.
I think the other thing here is obviously, I would love it. I still think if they're gonna stick with the playoff style, I think that the championship race should be like a 3-round kind of thing that is a culmination of stuff, so that the championship isn't just decided by one race. Technically, you could win 35 races and still not win the championship if you lose that last one. That's obviously never going to happen, but that's technically could. So I'd still rather see that, but I think that this is a better step, at least towards something, a little bit more exciting for that final race, and one where we might get. I feel like Homestead usually has a good finish, so that'll be exciting for a championship to finish up there as well.
Yeah, hopefully the next step, kind of like you alluded to, is some changes in the playoff format and getting a little more balanced format here. But yeah, if they're gonna have one race to decide it all, I would much rather be Homestead than Phoenix,
for sure.
personally.
Quickly, just hit up on the Indy 500 Open test that we had earlier this week. The big things that come out of it were Larson and Sato both had crashes. Not too worried about Larson, in my opinion. I think it's actually could be a good thing that he was able to kind of push and find those limits at Indy, and he can rein it back in from there, and know that was a step too far, obviously. And it's better to have something like this happen now when they have a lot of time to work on that car and get it back to where it was, versus in the middle of May. I think it's better that it happened now, at least. So I don't think there's anything too big to be concerned about there. The Sato one, it was similar to Bell. I was just glad to see that he walked away good from that one. That was a pretty hard hit for him as well. So I think those are the big takeaways. Nothing crazy to come out of it other than those two crashes. I will say, it was good to see the guys back out at Indy. And I appreciate the fact that they were able to broadcast it on YouTube live to, so that you could watch it and keep up with it. I did appreciate that from IndyCar, and I guess there was some help from Fox there as well, so that was good to see, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have pretty similar takes on the Larson bit of it. We talked about that a little bit off air, that it's definitely better that he go ahead and find the limit now, and especially for a guy that's more unfamiliar with the car. I know that he was, of course, in this race last year, but doesn't have the experience of pretty much any driver in this field. So yeah, I'd much rather him find the limit now, and I'm not worried about him at all in the race. He's one of the favorites to win this race, despite not being a full-time Indy driver, only being his second IndyCar race. So, I think that shows the confidence that everyone has in him. And like you said on the Sato crash as well, I'm glad that he's okay. He's Indy 500 legend and one of the older drivers out there at this point. So, glad he walked away safe. And yeah, I think that as far as watching times or positions, like you mentioned, there's not too much to read into this. But yeah, certainly glad that they gave the fans the access to watch it and keep up to date, because it's such a big part of the IndyCar calendar. Even if it's just practices, there's so many of them, and it leads up to the by far the biggest race of the year. So yeah, a good job by IndyCar to make that public, and even though these aren't normal race week practices.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get to our predictions for next week. A loaded week next week. F1, NASCAR, IndyCar, and there's a Formula E double hitter in Monaco. We'll just make our predictions for F1, NASCAR, and IndyCar though. We'll start with F1 in Miami. I have Lando Norris getting the victory here. He picked up his first win here of his career last year. Don't forget, though, Oscar was the leading McLaren before that safety car came out. I still think we saw, I still think that once Lando got the lead last year, he pulled away in great fashion, really was able to take a hold of that race. So I think, it hasn't historically, I guess, been Lando's best track, but a lot of good vibes for him coming back here, and maybe can kind of get his season going back in the right direction after a couple tough weeks. I still think, as well, we saw a lot of positives from Lando in Saudi despite the subpar result, finishing P4. in that qualifying crash. I think we'll still see. I think a lot of that will transfer over the positives that he was able to take away. Just he had great pace, and I think he'll be able to lay down a good lap in quali as well, and get his car up there. Where he can fight for a win this week, where he really hasn't been able to the past couple races with P6 and P10 start places. And then second, I have Max Verstappen. Prior to last season, he was the only guy who'd ever won at Miami. I think he was on pace to do the same last year as well before that safety car came out. He's done well on tracks this year where he performed well in the past, like Japan, for example, as well as Saudi last time out. Two tracks where he's done very well in his career. Miami is another one of those. So I think, in a car that's not where he wants it to be, just these tracks where he's comfortable at is, a ton of help. And I think that'll, get him up to P2 this week. And then third, I have Oscar Piastri. I still think he's got, a great chance to win this race and have a solid weekend. I guess I'm bullish on Lando right now, despite what the result may say from last week, and on Max just because he's been so good at Miami here.
Yeah, so I think we've got the same kind of idea here, but different order. I am going to go with Max P1 this week.
All right.
He's just really dominated this track throughout its existence. I know that last year, obviously, Lando won, but, Max very well could have won that race before the safety car. So I'm taking a little bit of a swing just because we don't know week to week what Red Bull's car is going to look like. But, we've been picking a lot of McLaren lately, 1 and 2, and want to switch it up a little bit here with a track that Max has historically been great at.
I like that pick, though.
I am going to go with McLaren 2.
I just think it's I think it could be a very Red Bully track, and obviously, like I said, Max has been very good here, so I think that's a great kind of I guess underdog. It's hard to say Max is an underdog, but kind of an underdog pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Just taking a little bit of a swing, and then we'll probably keep it chalk from there. McLaren 2 and 3. I'll go ahead and say Lando gets second and Oscar gets third this time. Just due for Lando to have a little bit of a bounce back. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough, obviously, to win the race since I picked Max, but Lando's due for a finish ahead of Oscar. A big reason why I have Max pole is I just have more trust in him in that qualifying lap that he could come out and put it on pole, and then with how tough of a track Miami can be to pass sometimes, that he would be able to keep it in front throughout the race. So we'll see. Obviously, Lando P2 will depend on if he can get this qualifying form sorted out a little bit, but I'll say that him and Oscar both put in a solid performance, but Max puts in another all-timer here to take the top step.
Yeah,
of the podium.
I like that. I think it's I think of any place, I think it's as good of a place as any for Max to sneak in and grab one, and kind of keep reminding people that he's still in the championship fight, even if he says he's not for this year. My one bold prediction is Liam Lawson gets his first points of 2025. I think he's in the right direction. He had a solid race last time. Got a harsh 10-second penalty at the end that dropped him from 11th to 12th. He's just on the fringes of the points there. And this is a track where Racing Bulls had a lot of pace last season. Danny Rick had a great sprint race. And Yuki, I'm pretty sure, had a solid points finish as well in the actual Grand Prix. So, I think that there's going to be good vibes from a team standpoint. And I think Lawson's kind of settling back in and, moving things in the right direction. So I got Lawson for some points. I guess that could come in the sprint as well. So we got, kind of two chances at it this week. I think that helps as well.
Yeah, I like that shout. It is, of course, we saw last year Ricardo kind of have his last real great performance in the sprint here in the V-Carb car. And, we might get something like that from Liam this week, even if it's just in the sprint. I'm going to go with a little bit of a. We've seen that Haas have a pretty good year so far, but they've been a little up and down. Especially Ocon has been kind of all over the place. From 7th or 8th all the way down to like 18th, depending on the week. But I'm going to back them this week. I'm going to say that we get Haas double points. Even if it's just a 9-10 or something. But I think both those guys have been driving the car really well. Obviously, that's as close to a home race really as they get, the closest to their home quarters or headquarters in North Carolina. I like Haas to come in and deliver this week and double points, even if it's not flashy or anything. I think they're going to get the job done.
Could be a true what is a kilometer moment. Bald eagles flying everywhere, screeching. Haas, USA, chants in the stands from all the Haas fans. USA chants everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, after this race ended Sargent's career last year, we're kind of due for that. So
yeah,
hopefully we can get it this weekend.
Moving on to NASCAR at Texas, I have William Byron to get the win here. I think I have to go with Byron. He has the best average finish here in the last 3 years, with 3.7, a great average finish. On top of that, he hasn't finished outside the top 10 in that same time period of the last 3 races here. Hasn't won since Daytona. I think it's time for him to get back in the winner's circle, kind of break through again, even though he, is, at the top of the points right now. I think it's time for him to get back on top of in the winner's circle and take control of, the regular season championship lead, I guess, again. So I have Byron to win at Texas.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. I think, if you're looking at this statistically, I think he's probably the first pick that jumps out to you. I'm going to go with another guy who has great stats here. I'm going to go with Tyler Reddick to get the job done and win at Texas. Obviously, a recent winner at Texas, but also has led the most laps of anyone there in the next-gen era. Has really had a solid season this year, even if it maybe hasn't been as flashy with as many wins as last year. He's still been really solid, and I think he's going to get the job done. And I think this is going to be a big weekend for 2311 in general. Between Reddick and Bubba, they've led about 30% of the laps here in the last few years. So really, really solid track for them, and I think they're going to come out swinging and deliver a big weekend.
2311 and Toyota both, I feel like, are really good on these mile and a half. So I think that's a great pick as well. Reddick, a guy who I thought had a great chance to win the championship this year. I think he still does. I think he's getting a bit more of a fight from his teammate than we expected, but I would not be surprised to see him win this week as well. My one bold prediction is that Brad Keselowski gets his first top 10 of the season. Average finish of 5.7 here in the last 3 races, and 3 top 10s, similar to Byron in that same time period as well. If there's, going to be a time where Brad K gets his first top 10, I think that this is a great opportunity for him, and to really rebound from a bad week for RFK as well at Talladega, like we mentioned earlier. So hoping that Brad K can, snag some solid top 10 points here, and kind of maybe right the ship a little bit for his number 6 team.
Yeah, I know this isn't going to be my bold prediction, but I was just looking down the recent stats here. It'd be really funny if this was the weekend that Ryan Blaney comes back and, kind of randomly wins one. This is one of his worst tracks, really, statistically, all the way down to 28th in average finish, next-gen era. So, obviously, I just picked a different winner, but it would be kind of crazy to see something like that happen. I'm going to say this. Not only is this a big weekend for 2311, but I really like Trackhouse this weekend. I think they're going to come out hot. I think we're going to see at least 2 of their cars, maybe even in the top 5 here. Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain both have really good histories on this track, especially Suarez's 4th best average finish here in next gen. So I'm going to say Trackhouse, just in the spirit of bold, I'll say 2 Trackhouse guys in the top 5, but I think that they're going to be right up there with 2311, and Hendrick as well will probably have a big weekend, like you mentioned, with Byron.
I thought you were going to say SVG top 5. I thought that's where we were going.
Not quite with the
That
my
would be
faith
really
isn't quite
bold.
there yet in the ovals, but hey, maybe. Yeah, maybe it'll be SVG and Blaney fighting it out for the win.
That would be something. Let's go to IndyCar here at Barber. Wrap this up. Chevy's won the last 3 races here. Pato in 2022, McLaughlin in 23 and 24. I think that continues, and Pato gets back on top of the podium again here in 2025, coming off probably his worst track in the series at Long Beach to one of his best here at Barber. 2 top 5s in the last 3 races here, including that win. I think he's in a great position for a big points haul this weekend. So I have Pato getting his big win here, and starting off the month of May, hopefully in a good direction. I'm hoping for him to win the 500 this year, just with how close he's been. So hopefully this gets that in the right direction at least.
Yeah, I really like that shout. I'm, obviously rooting for Pato here, and he's due for a big finish. So, yeah, I would love to see him get back on the top step here. I'm gonna go with a guy who really has a great history here, but hasn't won here in a long time, and that's Will Power. Due to get back on the top step. Obviously, another Chevrolet guy, of course. Since COVID, he's finished second, fourth, third, and second here at Alabama at Barber, and it feels like he's due to return. Won this race a couple times back in the early 2010s, but it's been a long time coming to see him get another win at Barber, and just feels like a guy that really knows this track well and can dominate. Obviously, Scotty Mack has won here twice recently, like you mentioned, back to back. So that's another guy to watch out for. But I'm gonna go with Will Power and back him to get the job done.
Yeah, I
here.
was looking through the past season's results earlier, and I saw a lot of Will Power, and I forgot how good he's been here. So I think that's a great call. My one bold prediction is that Christian Lundgaard gets his 3rd straight podium, back-to-back 6th place finishes here for him the past 2 seasons, and he's performing at probably the highest level in his career right now with back-to-back podiums in the past 2 races. I don't think he should be overlooked for 3 straight here with a solid performance this weekend. What seems to be a track he loves. So I think Lundgaard for a 3rd straight podium, probably my least bold of the 3 bold predictions for next weekend, but I do like him to get back on the podium, and that would mean a big week for the Arrow McLaren team as well, with Pato winning and Lundgaard on the podium.
Yeah, I love that shout. I mean, he's really been one of the most impressive drivers so far this season. Was a guy that we both backed to kind of have a big year this year, but we both, I don't know if either one of us saw this coming. How well he's done so far, and really giving Pato kind of a run for his money as the main guy there at McLaren. I know it's early, but has really done a great job so far. For me, I am going to kind of go with a prediction that it sounds, I don't know whether it's really bold or not, but just given this guy's history, I guess it is. I'm going to go with Alex Palou not to be on the podium here. Just is a guy that anytime he steps onto one of these road courses is a favorite, a guy that we think can win the race, but last 2 times out at Alabama has still finished 5th and 5th, not too shabby, but not on the podium. He has won here before and came in 2nd, so at the end of the day, that makes it a little bolder than it sounds, I guess, but I'm just going to go with Palou not to be on the podium here. I just think there's a lot of other guys that are strong at this track, and he's had such a good start to the year. He's due for, even a guy as good as he is, he's due for a little bit of a setback here.
I think back-to-back 5th for him is a bad thing. Just shows how good Palou is. So I like that pick, though. I think there's a lot of other guys that really like Barber, so that might make it a little bit more difficult for him to find one of those podium places. I like that one as well.
Yeah, I know it's really tight in there. Just so many guys, Power, McLaughlin, like you mentioned. There's so many guys that are going to give this a good run this week. O'Ward, Lundgaard. So there's just steep competition even for a guy like Pillow. It wouldn't shock me either way, but yeah, just going to say he takes a little bit of a step back this week.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's everything for this week. We'll be back next week with a lot to break down from three big races as well as a doubleheader in Monaco for Formula E. So a long episode next week. Thank you guys for listening, and Sam, happy birthday as well again. And we'll see you guys next time.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. Thank you to everybody listening, and we'll see you next week. A lot to catch up on.